Hello everyone and welcome to Heart Hand the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week, and joining me is your host Cammy Bell as always is my very good friend Iain Campbell. Iain, thank you very much for coming on. It's not been recently I've had a chance to get you on extra, but glad to have you on because I'm keen to get your thoughts about, is there a title challenge at the moment? Where are Rangers to now, and what does January look like? So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, Cammy, thanks for having me on. Another feather in my heart and hand cap, but no, I'm delighted to be on. Absolutely fantastic. We've been talking about this for a wee while, so yep, it's been quite a tumultuous week within the league. So yeah, we're going to go on and talk about that and see exactly where we lie in the kind of grand scheme of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And regular listeners will know I've been kind of championing it a bit, Iain, to say, well, if things can improve and this can happen, and can we get into a title race and what will it look like? And I didn't expect Celtic to make that dream to come true, but it seems that Wilfred Nancy is doing his absolute best to make it happen.
It's quite incredible, Cammy. It's Christmas come early for us at the moment, to be perfectly honest. It's lurching from one disaster to another. Civil war, obviously, Lawwell resigning as well. All the stars seem to be aligning at the moment for a disaster for them coming up to the festive period, which I'm hoping, which we're going to discuss, that we can take full advantage of. But listen, I won't linger too long on it. I think, I sat and watched the game against Dundee United the other night as well. They're in a bad way at the moment. I think it's fair. Listen, we've not had a great season. Let's put it in the context. We've talked about it on our group chats before as well. It's difficult, but there is a certain degree of Schadenfreude in there in terms of, listen, it's always going to be that case when it's your main rival. You're going to look at it and you're going to take a little bit of glee out of their misfortune. But I think their fan base and their very entitled support are now beginning to find that the key components that have kept the kind of wolves from the door are now going or are going to go, and they're beginning to see the real limitations. On Wilfred Nancy himself, the guy is just, he's in the wrong movie. He's out his depth. I don't know if it's a thing in terms of, I know he's worked in America with Columbus Crew, but even his interviews, etc. It's just, it's turning into some real comedy gold. I mean, the tweets and the memes going out at the moment, it's a walking meme, and for us as a support, it's great because it's, there's internal strife there as well, which can only be a good thing. We need to focus on what we're doing ourselves, and I'm sure that's the manager saying that. He's not looking at the outside noise in any shape or form, but yeah, it makes Christmas just that little bit sweeter, Cammy.
Yeah, it does. And listen, we'll move off them just now because we're not here to talk about that a lot as well. But I'll say this, I've said it before, Iain, but if you can't find time in your life to laugh at Celtic, then I think, frankly, you're doing something wrong. But we are here to talk about the famous Glasgow Rangers, and I'm keen to get your thoughts because we've not had a chance to really kind of catch up about this, about Monday night's game at Ibrox against Hibs. A bit of a stuffy game. I don't think that Rangers started well. For the first half hour, I thought, we could be in a wee bit of bother here. But then up pops Manny Fernandez from a great Dujon Sterling cross. Rangers saw the game out. I actually thought we got a lot better in the second half, and I think what was really important, and I'm keen to get your thoughts on this, especially because obviously you do an excellent job with our preview show on the Patreon site. Did the game go to how you thought it was going to go? Any concerns, or was it just a case of let's just get the 3 points, let's try and finish up as strongly as we can and get that done and dusted?
I think at the moment, and the manager's alluded to this quite a few times since he's came into the club, that right now it's just about winning. And I think I think if you were to take a straw poll amongst the fans, you could say in terms of what would your preference be? Would your preference be to win ugly, or have flamboyant football and don't worry about the result and get a draw or get a defeat? All day long we're going to talk about we want to get that victory. So I think that's important. I think it was a not clinical, that's the wrong word. It was a routine one, if you want to call it that. A routine one. Now, if you look through the history books, how many times have we won 1-0 at Ibrox? How many times have we won away? How many times in the league winning seasons have we won 1-0? Hibs, for all their hype this season, and again, obviously I do a bit of the SPFL show with Kevin and Stephen on Patreon, that I've been watching them quite closely, and they have put in some decent performances, but they do tend to, I think against us this season, they're misfired, and I thought they did again. Now, I know we're focusing on us, but sometimes you've got to look at the opposition. And I thought we didn't start greatly. Obviously, Dujon has that fantastic clearance off the line. I thought we grew into the game in the second half. And I thought really from about the 60th minute onwards, even though you could, you're only a goal away, I didn't feel as if Hibs really carried that much threat. They didn't look as if they were going to cause us a problem. And towards that last kind of, there've been games at Ibrox, Cammy, let's put it this way, when we're beating teams, Livingston per se, we've had it, last season and this season, we're 2-1 up or 1-0 up. You're thinking they're just going to start hooking long balls into the box. Hibs aren't that kind of team. Hibs will go on the deck. They'll try to play football. They won't go long unless they have to. And again, you can take your hat off to David Gray and say, look, that's great. That's the kind of football we want to see in the league. But that plays into our hands as well. Because if they're not pushing and start, bombarding you and you're sitting there as a support getting nervous, I thought for that last 10 to 15 where it could be a bit jangly, I thought we were quite comfortable.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, like I say, we didn't start well. And one of the things that we've seen from the manager now is that he acknowledges what he has to do and the tools at his disposal. And what he can try and do to get out of it. And David and Todd were talking about this in the flagship, and I think Todd hit it with a brilliant phrase, which was, he might not be getting a tune, but he's getting a rhythm. And listen, I thought that was just brilliant when I heard it, because he's 100% right. The thing that Danny Rule has to do now is, it is about being able to get wins. That's it. That's the bottom line. I know and you're completely correct what you're saying in terms of, if we could make them routine, then brilliant, because we've had far too many hear-em-scare-em moments, which ultimately have led to such a poor start in the league. Would definitely have changed the picture and the landscape of the league if we were able to convert those draws into wins. But such is life, and that's the road that we've travelled down thus far. So Danny Rule now, you can see that he's probably had to go back to basics in terms of, we obviously had to sort out the defence. He has not been assisted with that, with injuries to Suter and Cornelius. We've had to do some rotation. We've obviously had injuries. That's part and parcel of the season, of course it is. But the most important thing that Rule can do now is just try and get that stability to continue, and then we'll look at other designs that he wants to implement in terms of being able to try and be a wee bit more fluid with the ball, being able to try and break at pace. You can almost see, and I think you saw, he did cut a frustrated figure with, how we started the game. But then after half-time, a couple of passes or a couple of moves that broke down just with a slightly misplaced pass. He's not going mental. He's not going crazy on the touchline and screaming and shouting at players, because I think he also understands there's a limitation to what he can expect out of them at the moment. But if he can continue to build on that, and it gets supplemented with any new intake that come in January, then it will start to tick over. That rhythm will become a tune.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing for any manager coming in mid-season is to spend time on the training field with players. They need to understand what the philosophy that he wants. Now we're seeing the complete, the complete other side of that across the city, but in terms of what he wants and what he wants to build, yep, we've talked about it, and it's been talked about various shows on the network, and myself and Kevin said it quite a lot in various shows he's been on, that you can't judge the manager with what he's got at the moment. He's working with certain elements that he needs to utilise. So he can only put certain players on the park. That's what he's got at his disposal. Let him get to that January window, get the business done early, hopefully, get it looked at. Obviously with Stig Bjornaby coming into the club as well, I think that's a positive step forward. The talks about Lee McCullough coming in to help the recruitment team. Jig's obviously quite a frequent visitor at the hospitality. I've met him a few times this season myself. He's a fantastic guy. I wasn't aware. I'd kind of had it in the back of my head that he was doing work for Brighton. There's obviously he's doing, as David touched on the update yesterday, Jig's an educated guy. He's got a degree. He's out there. He's doing it. He's not just an ex-pro footballer that you bring into the club for that whole kind of, he's an ex-player. He's coming in with a bit of pedigree behind him as well. And if that can strengthen the recruitment going into January, the manager had alluded to, I think, today in the press conference, that there are targets they've already looked at. Initially they're starting to make initial moves. For us as a fan base, I think you can see what he's trying to do, short to medium term for this season, and then start to build going into the following season as well. So these are the things that I think from the season we've had, Cammy, and you take in, if you dial back into the dark days just before, obviously, Russell Martin departed the club and we were all coming at Ibrox shaking our heads. where we're at, and you look at the form table and where we're at. I think we're the form team in the league, if I'm not mistaken. That although it's not been pretty, although it's not been great, get the wins. And coming into December is always an absolute howler of a month, a tough month when it comes to fixtures. So get through that month, get the results on the board. The next 4 games are massive domestically for us, huge, absolutely huge. Obviously starting with Sunday, which we'll come on to talk about, but if we can get results in the next 4 games, by God, we'll put ourselves a very strong position, and obviously looking for those reinforcements to come in.
Yeah, the McCulloch thing's interesting because actually when we were talking about this last week on Extra, David Marshall and I, the point I was making with Dave when we were talking about it was I'm not sold. I understand it, right? So I'm not criticising anyone who does believe in this. I'm not sold in this idea of bringing in ex-players for the sake of the fact that they're ex-players. And the McCulloch thing I think is really interesting because part of what I had said before about Barry Ferguson when he was manager was that my hope, and it still continues to be, by the way, right, because I'll never ever fail to acknowledge how important Barry Ferguson is in the history of Rangers Football Club. But my hope was always going to be that after he'd had his interim period, that if he fell back in love with management and he wanted the Rangers job on a permanent basis, that he would go back into management, work his way through it, get the experience, and then potentially come back. Where he is now, he's not qualified for it.
Yeah.
And qualification, I think, is the key word. And I agree with you. I think that McCulloch is a smart guy. I think he has wanted to explore other avenues within football. And you're right, he's up at Ibrox a lot. I think he's doing a dinner this weekend, I think, actually, with Ferguson and Nicola Docherty. Because he loves Rangers. He still wants to be involved in and around the club. If we can bring him in, then we're not just bringing him in because he used to play for Rangers. We're bringing him in because, again, if he's been able to go away and get his qualifications, get some experience at Brighton, if he does have access to different networks, if he's got various other tools in his chest that he can bring with him, and justify what it is that we're looking to bring him in for. Then I think that would be a very interesting appointment. I want to talk to you. You touched on him there in terms of John Brady coming into Rangers. A key advisory role, I think, is the official term. He's been brought in as a consultant on a 6-month basis. And the manager was talking about it at the presser today. I just want to go over some of these comments, if I can, please, Iain, because
sure.
Quite interesting, because he said, we speak to each other and we have good communication at the moment. I'm speaking to the players at the moment and I've had some conversations. All the things that we have to do, and then see how quickly we can move forward. All the players, they'll come and help us soon, and it's good to have them here. It's good to have them here. But when he was talking about new intake, the manager had said, at the moment it's a mix of us together. I put names to the recruitment team. They give me some recommendations. I watch the videos, give them feedback, and we look again at the data. I try to have some talks with getting a feeling for players. I ask them questions about expectation, if they really know what that means. And I think this is part of my job. I must say, this is the first time I'm also looking exactly at this point. Normally, you just speak about the tactical things, but for me, it's also important to understand how they handle setbacks, how they handle pressure, and how was the pressure in the past. For me, this has been a big learning experience since I came here. It's important. Now, that when I read that earlier on today from the manager's press conference, it was absolute words to my ears, because I have been banging on about this for ages around someone. Whenever you're recruiting someone, whether it's a head coach, whether it's a player that you're looking to be able to bring in, someone needs to have the conversation with them about pressure. Because I think that what you've seen thus far from the Rangers season today is players who and head coaches who didn't understand what that pressure was. And you can have dealt with it in the past and have some experience with it, or you're going to have to convince me as I sit across the table from you that you can handle it when it comes, but you have to be aware that it's there. You have to be aware that it's a thing. And when I read that earlier on today, I was just delighted that we're acknowledging it now. We're actually bringing this into the conversation of we're talking about player recruitment, because if, and it's obviously a huge if, we are going to talk about mounting a campaign to win the league, we need to make sure that the players understand exactly what that involves.
Yeah, and I think you touched on not just the point about pressure, but how players respond. And I think that requires character. And, going forward with the existing group, we've seen that some of them just quite frankly don't have the character for it. They don't have the ability to deal with it. It's an old cliche, an old trope that the jersey can be too heavy for some players. And that is the reality. That's not some cliche that's bounded about throughout the years and throughout the decades. It's true. There is an expectation at this club. There's an expectation from the support. There's an expectation from what is a sporting institution more than a club. Sorry, just to coin a phrase or use a phrase there. But I think how players respond to adversity, I think is important as well. And the fact that I agree, it's music to my ears as well, because the manager acknowledging that and saying, listen, there has been maybe a weakness in the mentality, as some of these players. I've spoken to them. If he thinks he can improve that mentality, if he can coach them, if he sees there's something there, then great. They'll remain and become part of that squad. Those who don't, they will go in January. As much as we talk about players coming in, there will be players leaving the club in January as well, because he will have identified that and sat down and had the conversation and says, I don't think you've got the mentality. You've not got the want. You don't have the desire. Unfortunately, Messrs Thelwell and Martin, I won't linger on it too long, but they underestimated Scottish football, and to your peril, as much as we decry the league and we talk about, the league's poor, it's, we're always going to get a comparison next to our EPL neighbours. You can never get away from that. However, it's a very tough league. It's very unique in the way it's shaped in terms of the physicality that's involved in it as well, the mentality, some of the grounds that you have to go to, the tribalism that exists, the amount of clubs you have within such a small population of 5.5 million. Football, people live and breathe football in Scotland. It's different from somewhere like France or the Netherlands where it's a pastime. It's not that. You've seen the passion come from supporters. We've seen it, a couple of European games ago when the guys were, I think it might have been in Bern, and they're at the airport going, this isn't just a hobby for us, this is our life. And that's what the club means to so many people, including you and me, and the majority of people, I dare say, that are listening to this show. So the fact is, the manager has already grasped that quite early on and said, listen, you can't come here and play for me or be part of this club unless you've got that mentality. You need to show me strength. You need to show me that willingness, to bounce back from adversity. Because, as you said, Cammy, if we're going to mount a challenge, and I dearly hope we can, it would be possibly the greatest comeback since, I don't know, since Frank Sinatra. One of these ones where you asked us back in September, would we be here in December? Of course, we didn't think that would be the case. If we can mount a serious challenge and really compete for the league, you're going to have everybody firing on all cylinders. The manager seems determined and is focused to me, the way he's talking within, obviously, the press conferences. As you said, his post-matches as well, he is cutting frustration, but then he's saying, listen, we grew into the game. He's analysing it. And I think Rowe's one of these coaches where he's a bit of a little kind of new wave, where he will take that step back and look at the psychology of it. And the mentality thing, I don't think we've seen since the days of, and I'll go back to it, since Gerrard. Gerrard, when he came into the club, said, I want players who want to play for the club. I want players that have got the right mentality. It's not just about the ability, it's about the man, it's about the person. And I think you're going to see that with the January recruitment.
I think there's part of that. And listen, I cannot say this with any evidence, so please don't think that I know something that other people don't. Of course not. But I think that you see a big part of that epitomised in guys like Joe Rothwell.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say, you're right, we're not going to cover all ground and start criticising the transfers. We all know what where we are at the moment. But I think it's interesting when you see guys like Rothwell who have played in highly competitive leagues, and it is highly competitive in the Championship, for example. The money is different levels, right? Of course it is. So there is all of that. But I don't think that you can substitute financial targets, financial, incentives for what you've just called out there, which is it's basic human passion, which I think is bad in Scotland, but it's 10 times worse in Glasgow, because this is our life and we live it and we eat it, we breathe it, and that's exactly it. And it occupies our waking thoughts pretty much every 6 seconds. And Rothwell is not the first player to come here and potentially not get it, as in not understand what it really means. And that's where, listen, in a year, 2 years, 3 years, it wouldn't surprise me if he's sitting in some podcast at some point saying, I didn't get it. I thought I knew, I didn't know. and that's just the way how it kind of goes. And
See
they'll come out with stuff like that.
the full 360 on that. I was listening to a really interesting interview with Jermaine Defoe, right? Absolutely legend. I love Jermaine Defoe. The time he was with us, obviously, at the twilight of his career. And he was on a podcast and he was talking about how, before he came to us, the person he spoke to was Graham Souness. And he was doing a Sky game, I can't remember which one. Have you seen it? And he turns around and he says, I think we were playing Celtic. And he said, I walked out and Graham Souness was pacing up and down. And he said to him, he says, what's up? And he says, Rangers have got to win this today. And he sat down and spoke, he says, look, Jermaine Defoe said it then clicked for him how big it is.
Yeah.
And there's an example of, maybe that's the antithesis, the complete opposite of what we're seeing with people like Joe Rothwell. Some of the other players that have come down from the English leagues as well, or come up from the English leagues. There's an idea of somebody who gets it. Jermaine Defoe had a great career, successful career, but this was a step up, and he knew, even though it was in the twilight of his career, he knew, listen, I'm going to have to step this up here, because he got it straight away. Watching that passion from a man who supported us when he was a kid, who fulfilled a lifetime ambition of managing us, an absolute legend within our club, telling him, listen, we've got to win this, and still displaying that passion to that very day. I think that's the full thing. People like Joe Rothwell, he said there as well, listen, there's no doubt about his talent as a footballer. He's not shown it this season because he's looked unfit when he's come into the team. Let's be honest about it. If he gets a move back to England, as you said, a couple of years down the track, he'll sit in a podcast, or whatever it'll be, and he'll say, I underestimated it. Because you think you're going there for something else, just Scottish football. It's, how bad can it be? How tough can it be? Problem you've got is the mentality playing for somebody like Leeds, who are a massive club, right? And I'm not decrying that for a second. An absolute sleeping giant English football, in my opinion. But if Leeds get beat or they have a poor result, it'll be around in Leeds in the Yorkshire area for about a day. It doesn't go national in England. But if we have a poor result or we get beaten, it goes national in Scotland. It's a talking point for the next 7 days. That's the difference. That is the difference because, and I've said it before about, I think now our ownership, the 49ers, Kavanagh, Marath, now they're beginning to understand it. They're beginning to get their head around it. And I've been critical of them earlier on in the season, and quite rightly so, I think. They're getting their head around what this actually means. It isn't just a football club. And they've taken moves and understand it now, and I think they can see it. And I'm sure they're being advised internally as well and saying, look, you need to look at the bigger picture. Hence why we've seen the departures that we've seen from the hierarchy and obviously from the football side of things this season as well. They're now beginning to understand what it means. It's different. Ourselves in Leeds, even though we're in the same stable to a degree, same parent company if you want to call it that, we're two completely different beasts, different elements. You can't compare the two of them. And I think they're beginning to realise that.
Yeah, I think that's fair because we have said it and talking about the approach, and I think now the 49ers Enterprises realises it's not a one size fits all, and there is very different dynamics in terms of how we'll approach things versus obviously what happens down in England. It's not just about the levels that we've spoken about and financial incentives and all the rest of it. I think it's very much more, they're very much more aware of the picture, I think is probably the best way to be able to say it. Well, Iain, we've got a massive game coming up on Sunday. I am very keen to get your thoughts on it. I think it's going to be, it's either going to be end-to-end slobber knocker, or I think it's going to be a really dull as dishwater game. I don't think it's going to be anything in between. However, if you were to offer me the aforementioned routine win that we got against Hibs, I would bite your hand off for it right now.
I would take it. If it's an own goal coming off the back of Lawrence Shankland's arse, and it means it's a 1-0 victory for us, I'll take that. I think Hearts are going to come out all guns blazing in this one. I think they're in a position where they're top of the league. We're going to a very difficult ground. How many times we've seen it. Cammy, you've been there numerous times through the years. Tynecastle is one of the most atmospheric stadiums you'll get in Scotland, near Britain. I think they're going to come out swinging. I really do. I think we need to be ready for that. We need to be able to sustain the pressure for the first 10-15 minutes. They've got their tails up this season. They've not got the distraction of Europe. They've got a youngish Scottish manager who has went there after doing a fantastic job at Kilmarnock. We can't deny that. He's getting financially backed. They're probably going to spend again in January. And they'll want to reach for that league. It would be, how could you put it in context? Hearts winning a league campaign. That's You're going back decades since the last time they won the league. It would be massive. So they're going to come out absolutely up for it, absolutely fired. I think it's going to be a scrap. I think there will be goals. I'm going to be covering it on the preview with Stephen and Xander, but I think it's going to be a million miles a minute. I really do. I think it's going to be, Sunday afternoon. Don't know what the weather conditions are going to be like. It's 1:30 on a Sunday afternoon, early afternoon kick-off. I think it's going to be an absolute ding-donger, if we want to call it that. I think it's going to be back and forth. We sometimes talk about watching games of football and it's like a basketball game because it goes from one end of the court or one end of the pitch to the other. I've got a funny feeling this is what it's going to be like. We need to approach it in the right manner. We need to be going on there. I'm sure the manager will. I don't doubt for a minute that he's looked at Hearts and analysed them from where they've been this season as well. They've had some fantastic results where they haven't played well, but they're in their own backyard. They'll have, the backing of close to 14,000, and we'll have, is it 623 tickets we get for Tynecastle, something pathetic like that. So we'll have our own band in there making plenty of noise as well. But I think it's going to be a cracker.
Yeah, and I was dismissive of this Hearts team a few weeks ago, Ian, because obviously based where I'm based through in West Lothian, I interact with a lot of Hearts fans. They were enjoying, we were talking earlier on about Schadenfreude. Well, they were certainly enjoying it with me under Russell Martin. Then they had their wobble, and that was probably where I thought this could be very problematic for them. But I want to give Derek McInnes and Hearts and those players all the credit they deserve because they recovered from that wobble. They got a great result at Parkhead, and they've recovered. And we've seen plenty of Rangers teams that have had setbacks, league-winning Rangers teams that have had setbacks, but it's how you recover is a big test of your character to be able to do that. And the Hearts deserve to be where they are at the moment. And I think, as you talked there about the approach to the game, I agree with you. I think they'll come out swinging. I think that they'll want to play at a fast tempo. They've got really strong cohesion within that Hearts team at the moment. They are playing for each other.
Yes.
And Shankland's obviously had some absences, but they've been able to kind of get through without him. There's no doubt around his talismanic figure. And by the way, before anyone thinks this, I still do not think we should have signed Lawrence Shankland, but I might have to die in that hill. But I will not decry Hearts the attitude. They have worked hard to deserve it. They've absolutely earned the right to be able to come at Rangers just now. And you mentioned David Gray and his approach on Monday night. I think Derek McInnes will do exactly the same thing. What we have been guilty of throughout the course of this season has been that we've not made teams afraid to play us. Now, Hearts don't have a reason to do that. Danny Rule is changing that. So I now think that Derek McInnes will have to take pause and think about the approach to it. But I can't see Derek McInnes turning around now and saying, just because it's Rangers in good form, we need to be able to change things massively. Hearts will want to stick to the blueprint that's been able to earn them top spot.
Absolutely. And I think from his own personal perspective, he'll want to prove that he can compete with the Old Firm. It's as simple as that, and he's going out to prove that. He's going out. You look at some of the. I think it comes down to recruitment. As poor as our recruitment was during the summer, Hearts recruitment kind of quietly went under the radar in the close season. There wasn't a lot of discussion about it. We're looking at these players that they're bringing in. They had a record signing, etc., but they've been back financially. Some of these players are coming out. Braga, I think, has been a sensation for them. They've got a solid centre half pairing with Halkett and Finlay. Obviously Finlay had worked with McInnes at the past at Kilmarnock, took his wee stint down south. Halkett, former youth player of ours, had his injuries problems, but he's managed to maintain and be steady within the team. And he's built a real solid spine within the team as well. He's not everybody's cup of tea, but Cammy Devlin's a very, very effective midfielder in this league. And if he's got Beningame playing next to him, then they're a very potent combination. You've got experienced players like Kingsley that he can bring off. He's not really featured as much. Start lineup, they can come off the bench. He's got a wicked left foot. They're a real threat. And I think you're right. What we've done is, time and time again this season, we've let ourselves fall behind and we haven't went on the front foot. I think that's where you're going to see, as I said, I think it's going to be like two positive ends of a magnet coming together. I'm not suggesting I think we'll sit back and take it for the first 15, 20 minutes. But I think the manager will be pragmatic to the point where he'll be right, I know I can get in and I can hurt them. And how do I do that? But if we apply ourselves, we put the pressure on, we have the players up front. And I think that's what comes back to mentality. We talked about it earlier on. They'll see that, the players. And as much as I said, the manager will shut all the outside noise out and he won't allow it. There won't be any conversations about what's happening with other teams and losses, etc., or what's happening with other managers. He will be acutely aware because you can't escape it. The players will be looking at us and going, do you know what? We've got an opportunity. We go and put this could be a marker. You put this marker down, it could be a watershed victory. I really do think it could be on Sunday. If we can get all 3 points on Sunday, kick on, we then go into a home game on the 27th against Motherwell. And then that obviously leads us into going to the other side of the city. It could be massive. And, make no mistake, just keep winning. I mean, it sounds really simplistic, but just keep winning. That's all you have to do. You just keep winning. Forget about what the opposition are doing. Forget about points that are going to be dropped at their end. You just keep putting the points on the board and racking them up. But the players will certainly be looking at it and going, listen, as a team, you talked about team spirit and at Hearts. I agree with you 100%. Those boys are all playing for each other under the tutelage of Derek McInnes. I think Danny Rule's brought that in with us as well now, but you can see there's been a shift, a change in it. There's been a lot more aggression within the team, and that's I've been crying out for it like yourself for a long time, going, for God's sake, we just need some hardy bastards in the middle of the park. Somebody that's going to go up and going to argue with the ref. You've had Nico, Starling, Barron, maybe a little bit quiet as a figure, but even he's not questioning the referee about certain things. You've seen it on Monday night. Say, how's that a foul? Like, go up and do what other teams have done for years. Be right in the other opposition's face. Be up at the referee in a respectful manner. I might add. I'll say that, Cammy, because I know you're a ref. But be respectful to the referee. But ask the question. We've been really guilty of not doing that in the past. But we can get 3 points on Sunday. It sets us in a very, very good trajectory.
Yeah, there's a couple of big points that I want to come back into there as well. Because I don't think there's anything wrong with simplicity. I think that we have got to a stage where we've tried to overcomplicate things under the previous head coach, and there's nothing wrong with simplicity. And I refer to my earlier point around what Danny Rule can get this team to do at the moment, and how we can start to build on that. And as if it is going back to basics, and it's about being able to try and start things again and making things more simple than grand. That's exactly what I want, because we've been guilty, I think, of loading too much information into the players' heads, and he's not doing that. There is an interesting point where I think Rangers need a combination of two things on Sunday. I won't ruin the preview, Ian, but I'm keen to get your thoughts on what the back four is going to look like. I think that Sterling has come back in at a very, very good time for us, because I mentioned in our car pod after the Hibs game, I think a Rangers team with Dijon Sterling in it is a stronger team, physically a stronger team. And I think he brings some solid confidence in which we can start to build on if he's playing at any position within the back four. But the other thing within that as well is I think we need to ask questions of Hearts. I think we need to get guys like Mikey Moore being able to run at them. I think being able to work hard, as we will no doubt see from Connor Barron. We need to be able to try and take our chances. So I would be looking at guys like Chermiti. Unfortunately, the manager wasn't able to allude to confirming that Majowski was fit again. He said that, we've still got 48 hours to go, so we don't know if he'll feature or not. And Hearts, I think they were playing Falkirk on the Saturday night game at the weekend. You could start to see, Ian, that they were taking players off, I think, with one view, with Sunday's game in mind. We were not in a position where we could do that because of what we were doing. But we need to go and ask questions. We need to get guys like Chermiti that, even if it's not about finishing, because we know that's a major gap at the moment, is continuing to do what I enjoyed seeing on Monday, which has been able to hold the ball up a little bit better, been able just to, with a nice flick, been able to keep the ball moving, been able to try and contribute where he possibly can. And I know that David had made that point as well about, of course, we'd love to see Yusuf Chermiti scoring, a hat-trick on Sunday. Of course we would, but at this point in time, if what we can get from him has been a positive contribution in the game, then, we'll take that over him being anonymous. And Rangers need to set out to our game plan. I think you're right. I think that Rule will be pragmatic with it in terms of his original approach. absorb it a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with this idea of let's absorb a little bit of pressure just now, as long as we don't concede, but let's absorb a little bit of pressure. Let the home fans get a little bit antsy. How many managers have done that against us at Ibrox? But let the home fans get a little bit antsy and then look to see what we can create on the back of that. I don't think there would be any issues with that. But I'm keen to get your thoughts on how Rangers will line up. Where do we see Sterling playing within that? Obviously, we do have issues in the back line at the moment, and Giga is now away at AFCON as well. So it's going to be a change.
I think my own opinion is that I think he's going to go. I think we will revert back to a back four, and there's a couple of reasons behind that as well. I know he's preferred sitting with the three. I think Sterling will come in at right centre back with Fernandes. I wouldn't be surprised to see Tav start this one just for his experience at that ground, and I think really Magoma is your only option at left back. I think he'll go with the four to allow him to have that extra power in midfield, and I say that because I talked about Devlin and Bellingham in there as well, and I think that's where the game's going to be won or lost on Sunday, is going to be who wins that battle in the midfield. I think by allowing him to have that a little bit extra in the midfield, depending on whether Miovski's fit or not, you'd probably say he'd be the starter ahead of Chermiti. Say he's not fit just for talking's sake. You could have Moore potentially playing off there. Again, you could bring Gassaman just to bring that bit of pace. You'd have Moore playing off Chermiti. As that functional two up front and maybe dropping into the midfield when he has to as well, because he has one thing Mikey Moore certainly does have, and he's come on, he does have great recovery pace, and he does do that. He does the doggies or defensive work as well pretty well. He can contribute, but it allows us to have that little bit of extra dig in the midfield, and we do want to take the game to Hearts. I think in terms of get pace down the wings, get the ball in. I agree with you in terms of Chermiti. I mean, listen, I'm going to say this out loud. The boys had a lot of criticism this season, right? Justifiably, a lot of it because of his price tag. However, and I caveat this with however, we all want as a support to see him do well. We want every player that wears a Rangers jersey to do well. I'm the same, you're the same, all the listeners are the same, 50,000 Ibrox every week are the same. We want to see Yusuf Chermiti do well. He did a lot better on Monday night, and if he can bring that hold-up play, and you've got two pacey players either side of him, you're going to get real opportunities against a very good Hearts defence, and I think that's where pace will be the element that we use. But I think that battle in the midfield will dictate a lot of things, so we're really going to have to, that's why I think he's going to go with the back four. NCL has obviously come back into the team recently. I just can't see, in my opinion, that he's going to go with the back three. Listen, I could be completely wrong. Probably will be. It's not been the first time, it will not be the last time, but in my head, I just think he's going to go with a more traditional 4-4-2, going into a 4-5-1, if you want to call it that, and really solidify from back to front, to nullify Hearts' threat, and then allow us to play, you want to call it on the classic counter-attack. He said there, you touched on it as well, there's nothing wrong with being pragmatic, there's nothing wrong with soaking up a little bit of pressure. And we've seen it through the years with teams as well, that we can, under different managers, and we're a different set of players, we are a very effective, counter-attacking team. Tynecastle being the stadium it is one of those grounds where counter-attack can really pay off for you.
Yeah, I think as well, I think that set pieces will be very important on Sunday. I've been critical of Tavernier, and again, he's a little bit square peg round hole at the moment, because I think that the team can be faster without him. And it's not a criticism based towards Tav. His legs have gone, and that's aged and catches up with us all. Of course it does. But based on what we can do in terms of our deliveries of set pieces, I think that could also very much be a big part of it. But that's a two-way swing, because what Rangers also need to do, and I think it has got slightly better in terms of how we also defend set pieces, as well as looking to be able to try and get a goal through them. I think, like I say, it's either going to be lots of goals or barely any.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's going to be one or the other. And I think the first 15 to 20 minutes of the game are probably going to determine, it'll probably give us a kind of an outlier of how the rest of the game's going to go. Listen, would you take a 3-2, 4-2, something like that? Of course you would, but you don't want to see yourself concede goals. Would you take a 1-0? Yes. Any away ground you go to and you come away with a victory, I think you would take it as well. But I think the first 15 to 20 minutes are really going to dictate the kind of tempo and give us that kind of marker of how the 90 minutes is going to play out.
And I think there's a little bit there as well around one of our favourite terms here on Heart and Hand, which is a little bit of scoreboard pressure, because in years gone by, you would say Aberdeen playing at Parkhead. I don't even think bookies take that bet any longer. It's such a gimme. But if we can get a result and it makes their unhappy camp even unhappier with a wee bit more pressure, I think that would be quite interesting as well. Now, if you were to say to me, if Rangers win 4-0 at Hand and we go into second, at Hand and at Tynecastle and we get into second place, then absolutely fantastic. But winning the league, Iain, is all about maintaining degrees of pressure to the teams around you. So not only do I think a victory would be massive in terms of our confidence and us being able to implement what we want to do, but also just making them a little bit under the cosh, seeing their reaction, seeing how they react to that would be very, very interesting. And I think that would be it would be fun to watch. Let's put it like that.
We touched on it earlier about mentality. I think the psychology of getting a victory there on, obviously we're kicking off before they play against Aberdeen at home. You can't discount how big that is. You can't discount the effect that could have on them as well. So yeah, let's hope for the victory. Let's push for the victory and hopefully pile on the misery for them.
That will do us this week for Heart and Hand Extra. David will be back on Monday on Flagship to unpack the game at Tynecastle. And I will be back with you just before Christmas, as I will be talking about the Motherwell game on the 27th. So I will speak to you before Christmas. But thank you all for listening. Hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that you are getting ready for the festive season. I know a lot of people are finishing up tonight or this afternoon and getting ready for it. So if you're one of those lucky people, and I hope you enjoy a well-earned break, thank you to Mike Lee and Paul Myers. But also a big thanks to my guest this week, Iain Campbell. Thank you so much for coming on, and really enjoyed the chat, and I'm looking forward to listening to the preview later on as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Cammy. Great to make my debut on Extra. Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled to be on, and yeah, as I said, all the best to the listeners that are breaking up for the festive period. I hope they have a fantastic Christmas.
100%. And if you'd like to listen to the preview and a whole host of other great content, then join us on patreon.com/heart and hand as well. Just a wee reminder for you in case you've forgotten, but we are also having our fan media takeover show at New Edmiston House on the 9th of January. Tickets are available on their site. If you are struggling to get a wee Christmas present or a stocking filler for someone, jump on there, grab some tickets. It's going to be an absolutely great night with our very own David Edgar, Stevie Clifford and CJ Novo as well. I'll be attending, and I hope to see you all there as well. That will do us for this week, and I'll be back with you at some point next week once I get an idea of what days are what and all of that crazy Christmas madness. Iain, thanks again. I will obviously speak to you before it, but I hope you are set for Santa coming.
Yes, just about with an 11-year-old who's very much looking forward to Christmas. But yeah, just about there, Cammy, and getting ready to go for Christmas Day.
Perfect. Thanks, folks. We'll speak to you again next week. Bye-bye.